One cannot really argue with the mathematical theorem. Stephen Hawking was born on this day, January 8th, 1943. In fact, he's got Lou Gehrig's disease, and he was diagnosed when he was 21 years old. He is 74 years old now. 74 years old, which is incredible. He was 21. They said he had less than 10 years to live, and he's 74. He's lived 5 decades past when they predicted how long that he was going to live. Another quote, the greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance, it is the illusion of knowledge. Intelligence is the ability to adapt to change. It is not clear that intelligence has any long-term survival value. Apparently it does. 6 decades of his own life shows that. So I don't know why he'd be talking this dumb. So he actually fell while ice skating during his first year as a grad student at Cambridge University. Hawking was told he had the degenerative motor neuron disease, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, and only had 2.5 years to live. Obviously, that prognosis was light years off. Not light years. A light year is 186,000 years, right? Oh, no, wait. A light year, miles, 186,000 miles. That's weird to talk about light years like that. It's 186,000 miles per second. So they were not light years off. That's such rhetoric, biography.com. So the prognosis was light years off, but it seems early onset of the disease was a blessing in disguise of sorts. Most ALS patients are diagnosed in their mid-50s and live another 2 to 5 years, but those diagnosed earlier tend to have a slower progressing form of the disease. Furthermore, the loss of motor skills forced the burgeoning cosmetologist to become more creative. By losing the finer dexterity of my hands, I was forced to travel through the universe in my mind and try to visualize the ways in which it had worked. I've used Stephen Hawking for an example for many things, but essentially we are the products of our mind. He is only a mind. He is only a brain. He doesn't have use in anything else. He did have a funny quote that he doesn't like that machine that talks because it gives him an American accent. I think he was born in Britain. But, yeah, so because he had lost the finer dexterity of his hands, he had to force to travel through the universe in his mind and try to visualize ways in which it worked. And he says, he begins one of his books, if you ever looked up in the stars and just wondered what all this is and why we equation, if you could sum his life up with one equation, it's S equals pi times A times K times C to the third power, all divided by 2 times H times capital G. The formula, it involves the speed of light, C, Newton's constant, G, other symbols that make the non-mathematically inclined to run for cover, measures emissions from black holes that today are known, it's known as Hawking radiation. So he's got a theory that there's radiation coming out of black holes. He also says that there is no God, that the universe just spontaneously combusts. That's why there's something and not nothing. He was puzzled by these findings as he believed black holes to be celestial death traps that swallowed up all energy. However, he determined there is room for this phenomenon through the merging of quantum theory, general relativity, and thermodynamics, distilling it all into one relatively simple but elegant formula in 1974, already known for establishing important ground rules about the properties of black holes. This discovery kicked his career into higher gear and set him on the path to stardom. Hawking has since said he would like this equation to be carved on his tombstone. So he's known, the radiation that comes out of black holes is called the Hawking radiation because that's what he theorizes, that there's radiation that's coming out of it. I read a briefer history of time. I've read the first couple chapters of it, and he's the one that actually taught me really the origins of the universe. The closest star is the Proxima Centauri. The Proxima Centauri, which is 4 light years away. It would take 10,000 years on a spaceship to actually get to it. He also mentions that quantum mechanics and relativity, while opposites, he says that there's probably a general theory that combines should seek the greatest value of our action. The whole history of science has been the gradual realization that events do not happen in an arbitrary manner, but that they reflect a certain underlying order, which may or may not be divinely inspired. Science predicts that many different kinds of universe will be spontaneously created out of nothing. It is a matter of chance which we are in. All my life I've been fascinated by the big questions that face us and have tried to find scientific answers. If, like me, you've looked at the stars and tried to make sense of what you see, you too have started to wonder what makes the universe exist. So there's a movie actually out about him, The Theory of Everything, 2014. Again, the theory of relativity, quantum mechanics they're not, compatible, but he wants to sort of try to bring them together. He actually theorized that there's 11 dimensions. Somehow the whole universe, 11 dimensions is all. So he says, there's no God. God had no role in the creation of the universe. In the book, The Grand Design, he says that given the existence of gravity, the universe can and will create itself from nothing. Spontaneous creation is the reason why there is something rather than nothing, why the universe exists, why we exist. It is not necessary to invoke God to light the blue touch paper fuse and set the universe going. So that's remarkable. He goes ahead. It took him a while to say that. Before he says he couldn't disprove that God doesn't exist, but he can prove that God's irrelevant. He's a remarkable man. He's a rock star, and he's just a brain. I mean, it's incredible. So he's British, theoretical physician, cosmologist, author. His work on black holes. I want to read a little bit about some of his words at the end, but let's talk about general relativity, the theory of gravitation that Albert Einstein devised in the 1910s to replace that of Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton brought a scientific revolution, then Albert Einstein brought his revolution. And once you have a scientific revolution, you cannot fuck with the revolution, a scientific revolution, because essentially, can you go back before believing in gravity? Of course not. Once that genie is out of the bottle, unless you just want to be stupid, then I'd rather be dumb. So Isaac Newton's view of gravity assumed that massive objects created a field that permeated space, rather like the field of a magnet. This field enabled one body with mass, like Earth, to exert a force on another, like the moon or an apple. Newton did not claim to know what this force was. It was simply a fact of nature. That all objects that possess mass created. But according to Einstein's theory of general relativity, gravity is not a field in space. Instead, it is a property of space itself. The idea is that massive bodies, such as the sun, cause space to curve around them. This distortion of space affects the motion of anything nearby. For instance, it holds the Earth in orbit around the sun like a marble rolling around the rim of a bowl. One of the predictions of Einstein's theory is that a sufficiently large object, such as a really massive star, can collapse under the pull of its own gravity in a runaway process. All the mass shrinks into an infinitely small point of infinite density called singularity. This collapse creates a region of space so severely warped. There's going to be Spaceship 2 is going to go out into space or something, and Stephen Hawking is supposed to be there for when that happens. Here's the conclusion of a briefer history and time. We find ourselves in the bewildering world. We want to make sense of what we see around us and to ask, what is the nature of the universe? What is our place in it? And where did it and where we come from? Why is it the way it is? To try to answer these questions, we adopt some picture of the world. Just an infinite tower of tortoises supporting the flat earth is such a picture. So is the theory of superstrings. Both are theories of the universe, though the latter is much more mathematical and precise than the former. Both theories lack observational evidence. No one has ever seen a giant tortoise with the earth on its back, but then no one has ever seen a superstring either. However, the tortoise theory fails to be a good scientific theory because it predicts that people should be able to fall off the edge of the world. This has not been found